Hilchos Erchin Vacharamin Perek Shvi, the laws of valuation vows and dedication vows, chapter 7, the penultimate chapter, the second to last chapter of the 6th book of the Rambam. The last couple of days we've been talking about hekdesh, making things holy. In different ways, you say it's holy, you say it's cherem, a cherem dedication. Today, the topic is what's called pidyon hekdesh, redeeming something from being holy. Because that was one of the ways that you basically gave the temple treasury money. You would make objects holy, you would make your field holy, or your house holy, your property holy, and then either you or somebody else would buy it back, and by buying it back, you ended up giving the temple treasury money. Why didn't they give a donation straight? It's not so clear. Maybe they wanted to go through the process, or maybe they wanted others to buy it back. So the other person wouldn't just give money for free, but he would give money to buy something. So if the temple treasury had more objects, they could sell more things, and then they would be able to make money. Bottom line is there's a whole set of laws around how to redeem. Ich podim, hekdesh. And that's the topic for today. So the Rambam begins, ha-hekdeshos ein poidin oisan. Even though usually you can redeem a holy article with money, ha-hekdeshos ein poidin oisan, you're not allowed to redeem holy articles, loy bekarka, not with real estate. So you can't give a field in exchange for a field, let's say. V'loy ba'avadim shaharei hukshu lekarkois, nor with slaves. Slaves are compared in the Torah to land, to real estate. V'loy b'shtares, and not with promissory notes. It means you have a shtar chov. Says, right, basically you're giving, instead of paying money to the temple treasury, you'll give them your loan, and they can collect whatever it is that you're owed. She'ein gufan mamain, because they have no inherent worth. The document itself has no worth. Shenemar, how do we know that you cannot use these three things in the process of redeeming hekdesh? Because it says, v'nosan esa kesef. You have to give money. Money means only money. Echad ha-kesef, ve'echad shara mitaltalin sheshavin kesef, whether it's actual money or it's a movable object which is worth money, va'afilu subin, even if it's bran. But if once it leaves the realm of money, then it's not able to be used in redemption. Now, even though the Rambam says shenemar, which he usually uses for a pasuk in the Torah, the commentaries point out, v'nosan es ha-kesef, there's no such verse in the Torah. It's a combination that the Gemara makes from two different verses. But the bottom line is that we learn from it that it has to be money involved in the redeeming process of hekdesh. Halacha Bey is another rule. Kol ha-poida kadashav moisif chaimesh. If you were the original owner of the consecrated article and you redeem it, you have to add a fifth when you pay. How much is a fifth? So we've spoken about it a few times in the past. According to the Torah, a fifth is really a quarter.
20,
right? It's 25% essentially. Because then in total, see, let's say you have 4 quarters, right, on the screen. So if you give another quarter, now you'll have a total of 5 quarters. So the extra quarter which you gave is a fifth of the total. So it's really a quarter of the principal, a fifth of the total. Whether it's the person who himself made the object consecrated, or it's his wife, or it's his heir, they have to add a fifth, as we explained. The same way the main money that you used for redemption has to be movable property, the fifth also has to be movable property. When you add that fifth, it gets the same holiness as the hekdesh itself. They have the same law that applies to them both. Halacha Gimel ha-poida kadashav, when you redeem your consecrated objects, even though you have to add a fifth, the fifth isn't essential. That means, the moment you gave the principal, the moment you paid the full 100%, whatever was consecrated becomes regular ordinary, and you're already able to have benefit from it like a regular object, because once something is holy, you aren't allowed to benefit from it. But once you redeemed it, you can have benefit from it. You still got to pay up the fifth later, but the fifth isn't essential to converting it back, yes, to acquiring it. However, when we divrei Seifrim, the rabbi said that a person still shouldn't have benefit from the object till he actually pays out the fifth, because he might be negligent and not pay the actual money in the end. Aval b'Shabbos, but on Shabbat, if that's all you have to use for your meal, let's say you only have this animal that you just brought back, and you want to slaughter it for Shabbos dinner, and you haven't yet paid the fifth. So the Rambam says, since the whole thing anyway was only a rabbinic law, So in order to allow somebody to have pleasure from the Shabbos, they allowed him to eat from the holy object which he redeemed and didn't pay the fifth, even though he hasn't yet paid the full amount. Plus, as the commentaries explain, this is a second reason, the temple treasury is not going to get off your head. You know, when you owe somebody money and he's not going to sit on your head, so there's more reason to assume you're going to be negligent. But over here, who do you owe the money to? You owe it to Hekdesh. They're not going to forget about it. And they're not going to let you forget about it either. You ever promised a donation to the Chabad house? They never forget about it. They keep on emailing you. They send you invoices, right? That's how it works. We know how to go after the people and get the money. Temple treasury is the same way. They're not going to forget that you owe them, and therefore you won't forget either. And so because it's Shabbos, and there's Einig Shabbos involved, plus it's a temple treasury issue, the rabbi said, you know what, in this case, if you didn't pay the fifth, it's okay. Of course, later you have to pay it up afterwards. But for now, you can use it. Halacha dalid, kodshim mizbeach, shenafal bahen mum, v'nifdu. Sacrifices that were meant to be offered on the altar, they got a blemish, and they were redeemed. So really, we're going to talk about this at length in the Rambam's 8th book, when he talks about how to make a sacrifice disqualified. But since we're talking about holy things and redeeming them, so the Rambam brings it in over here as well. You have an animal, it's meant to be brought as a korban, and then it gets a disqualifying blemish, so now it cannot be brought as a korban. So what do? You have to redeem it. You have to pay the temple treasury, and this way you get the animal out to become ordinary, and the money remains holy. Or you can transfer the holiness to another animal and bring that one. The question is, what rules do they follow with redemption? So the Rambam says, if it's the person himself who consecrated the animal, if he's redeeming it from hekdesh, moisif chaimesh kishara hekdeshes. So we treat this animal no different than any other hekdesh. You have to add a fifth when you redeem it. But with a sacrifice, you have to be careful who is exactly redeeming it. If the person who originally consecrated it is redeeming it for his own use, then he has to add a fifth. Not if somebody is just simply going to be using it for his own sacrifice. Understand? Basically, the point is we have to look who was the one who made the animal holy. If he's buying it back, he has to add a fifth. Even if you're coming and saying, hey, I need the sacrifice, let me buy it back, and then in that way also it's considered to be you're the one who's owning it and using it. No, it's the original owner who pays the fifth, nobody else pays the fifth. Additionally, the hekdesh rishoin hu shechayav b'tosfos chaimesh. Only the first consecrated animal is obligated to be redeemed for an extra fifth. Aval hekdesh sheni einei moisef alav chaimesh. But a second layer of hekdesh, and we'll soon see what that means. It basically means you transfer the holiness from one animal to another. Now it has a second level of holiness. It's not the original animal. When you redeem that one, you don't have to add a fifth. Shenemar, because it says, V'im hamakdish yigales beisai v'yosaf chamishis. If the person who consecrated it, if he redeems his home, he has to add a fifth. Hamakdish v'lei hamatfis. That means the person who makes the original consecration, not somebody who attaches another level of holiness. Lefichach, therefore, im chilel behema al behema shniya. So you have an animal that was holy on any level. Bein bekachim bedek habayis, bein bekachim mizbeach shenafal bahem mum. Whether it was an animal that was meant to be dedicated to the temple maintenance fund, or it was an animal meant to be brought as a sacrifice, but it got a blemish, so you have to redeem it. And instead of redeeming it with money, you transfer the holiness of this animal to a new animal. Or you did what's called tmura. We're going to get more into this in a second, but there's this whole section of laws that says, special law, once you have an animal which is holy as a sacrifice, if nothing wrong happened to it, you cannot transfer the holiness to another one. Even if it's better quality. Surely if it's worse quality. But if there's an animal meant to be a sacrifice, and all is good, and you transfer it to another one, that's called tmura. You made an illegal exchange. And the Torah gives a fine for illegal exchanges. The fine is that both animals remain holy. So even though we give validity to your act, it's illegal and both of them become holy. So if you did this, you have an animal that was meant to be brought as a sacrifice. Heimir bekachim mizbeach means you committed the illegal act of tmura, of transferring the holiness. When you do redeem that second tier, the second animal to which you transferred the holiness, whether in a permissible or in an illegal way, you don't have to add a fifth, because that's hekdesh sheni. That's second level hekdesh. Second level hekdesh never requires adding a fifth. Now let's follow this case even though it's going to be more extensively dealt with in a later book. But again, since the Rambam is discussing all the laws of redeeming hektish, he goes into this over here. There is a law that if an animal becomes blemished, you must redeem that animal, either by paying money or by transferring the holiness to another animal. There's also a law that if you had an animal that was put away for a sacrifice, and you lost it, and you used another sacrifice to take care of what you needed to take care of, and then you find the original one, so the original one has what's called Teitzei V'tira Ba'eder. It goes out and it grazes with the herd. In other words, it's a regular animal for most intents and purposes, except you have to watch it and wait till it gets a blemish, a disqualifying blemish, and then you redeem it. So in other words, it still maintains some kind of aspect of holiness. So the Rambam gives a similar scenario that relates to these principles. It says like this: Hamafrish Asham lihiskaper boy. Okay, we'll go with animal number one. You put aside an animal for an asham, for a guilt offering, to use it as an atonement. Benafal by mum, and X, it gets a blemish. Now you cannot use it anymore for the sacrifice. So what do? V'hoisif alav chaimesh. So you follow the rules. You're a good guy. You added a fifth. V'chiluloi al behema acheres. Then you transfer the holiness to another animal. That's number two. Okay, so now this animal has been transferred with the holiness of the asham. For whatever reason, you didn't end up using this animal. Maybe it got lost. Maybe you forgot about it. You didn't use this animal. Instead, v'niskaper ba'asham acher. Use the third animal. This is why I put a check here, because this is the one that you used for the sacrifice. And therefore, the animal which you had originally transferred the holiness, this one number two, was removed to re'iyah. Re'iyah is that special law of pasturing out in the field and waiting until it gets a blemish. Kameshi Yisbar bin Kaimaz will be explained in its place. We'll get into those laws in detail over there. The point is, what do you do with this animal? Harehu safek. Now we're in doubt. Im meisif aleha chaimesh. Do you have to add a fifth when you redeem it? Because the rule is that if it's a second tier, second level hekdesh, you don't have to add a fifth. The question is, do we treat this as second level or not? The reasoning or the rationale to say why you should have to add a fifth is hoyel v'hu karban oila, because now it's a different sacrifice. The asham, the guilt offering, you already took care of with a different animal. This animal is going to be brought in the temple. If it's going to be brought, it's going to be brought as a burnt offering. Guf acher, it's another body. It wasn't the one originally consecrated. Kedusha acheres, a different type of holiness, and therefore when you redeem that one, you might have to add a fifth. Or maybe the rationale to not have to add a fifth is at the end of the day, how did it become holy? It only became holy because of this guy, number one, the first animal which you made holy. Which you already added a fifth when you paid to redeem that one. So maybe this one you don't have to add a fifth, so it's a doubt. It's an unresolved doubt. Halacha Zayin, returning now to the laws of Tmura, the exchanging. So the Rambam says, if the animal was originally intended to be brought as a sacrifice on the altar, that's where the laws of Tmura apply, and you cannot exchange one to the other. But if the animal was originally intended only to be used as a donation to the temple maintenance fund, then they don't have the power to effectuate an exchange, which means even if you try to exchange it, it doesn't work. It's a bit of a double negative in this expression. When the Rambam says oisin tmura, tmura works means we allow the illegal act to go through, your exchange has validity, and therefore you get fined and both animals become holy. But when you say ein oisin tmura, innocent tmura means we don't lend validity to your illegal act, and therefore the second animal doesn't become holy. Because the Torah only applied the law of tmura, exchange, to things that were meant to be a sacrifice to the altar. Keita, what does this mean? And we're going to use this picture again. You have an animal in front of you, two animals. One is totally mundane, totally unholy. The other one is holy for the temple maintenance fund. The Omar, and you try to transfer the holiness from the one to the other by using tmura expressions. The Omar, you said, zu chalufa zu, or zu tmura zu. I want this one to be in exchange for this one to be in exchange for that one. Lo Omar klum. You haven't said anything. Because you're dealing with an animal that's intended for the temple maintenance fund, the law of tmura doesn't apply. The transfer didn't take place. Avolim Amar, but if you would say some other form of transfer, harezu tachazu, this one will be instead of this one. Harezu mechuleles alzu. This one will be transferred to this one, dvar of kayam, and then your words have an effect, not because it's tmura, but simply because you're transferring hektish, which is allowed. Animal number one goes out to being mundane. Animal number two is now been caught and becomes hektish. When you have an animal which gets a blemish, whether it's holy for the temple maintenance fund or it's holy for the sacrifice on the altar, ideally, you should try to redeem it, buy it back from hektish for its actual value. Get it appraised, figure out its market worth, and be nice. Pay the hektish back the full animal of the money, the full money of the animal. But if you transgressed and you transferred the holiness, you redeemed it for less than its worth, or to an animal less than its worth. See, let's see over here. You have an animal which is 10, animal which is 5. So this animal was holy, and you transferred it to this one. So technically, you've transferred the holiness to a lesser value. Even if it's an animal worth 100 silver coins, and you transferred it to a coin that's worth 1 copper coin, a pruta, it works. Not ideal, but it works. The original animal has gone out to becoming chulin, becoming regular, and you can now have pleasure and benefit from it. The rabbi said, even if you did that, you can't get away with it. Go, get it appraised, and pay the difference. Halacha tes, Ketzad, what does that look like practically? We'll use this screen over here. Okay, you have an animal that was meant to be a sacrifice. It gets a blemish. It's worth $10. An animal that's mundane, worth $5. And you say, I'm transferring this one to that one. Okay, just ignore this word tmura. It shouldn't be there. Just regular transfer. Huh? No. It's all about value. Money value. So here, you're bringing a $10 animal to a $5 animal. So the $10 animal is redeemed. It goes out to being mundane. But you need to pay up the difference of the 5 that you made the temple lose. Similarly, if the first animal was holy to the temple maintenance fund, and you did the same thing, you transferred a $10 to a $5, it goes out to being considered mundane insofar as you can now shear it, you cannot use it to work your field, it's totally fine. And scripturally, biblically speaking, the second animal comes in its place. But the rabbi said, you have to investigate its worth, and either it's the same worth and it's fine, or make up the difference if it's not. Halacha Yud. How do we go about appraising an animal for hektish purposes, says the Rambam, Shamu Oisa Shloisha. As long as 3 people were involved in the appraisal, the Amru Shazu B'dameha, and they said that this is a redemption that's being done fairly at its proper worth. Afilu Bo Achar Kein Mea V'Amru, even if 100 people came later and said, Shal Kaidash Haisa Yafa, the holy animal was actually worth more, Einei Chayzer. Once you had 3 people declare that it was a fair game, it's fair, you can't retract it. Since the whole idea of getting it appraised is a rabbinic enactment, the rabbis weren't so strict. But if originally only 2 people were involved in the appraisal, and later on 3 people come and say, hektish was cheated, they were underpaid, even the slightest amount, the whole payment is retracted, then the guy who redeemed it has to make up the difference. Halacha Yud Aleph, ein peidenas hektish achsara ela b'chakiras damim kamesha b'yarnu. You cannot redeem hektish. Achsara means by estimation, by guessing. You have to go into it and get the exact worth, as we explained. V'im pada, if you chose to do it by estimation, yad hektish al ha'alyayna. The holy temple treasury will always have the upper hand in case of doubt. Ketzad, what does this mean? Let's take an example. You say, you have a holy cow, and you say, holy cow, no pun intended. You say, parazu tachas parazu shal hektish. I want to exchange this cow for this holy cow. Talizu tachas talizu shal hektish. This talis is going to be exchanged for that talis. Hekdeshay padui. So here, you did a redemption by estimation, right? You didn't check out the exact worth of each talis or the exact worth of each cow. So what we say is like this. We say, it works. The transfer works. The yad hektish ala al yayna. And now the temple treasury takes the upper hand. If the second animal, the second talis, was much more expensive, so they gained. The treasurers take it, be quiet. Sure, we'll take the higher value. And if it's not as high value, so pay the difference. So that we get whatever was higher value and add the fifth. But if the guy said, he didn't say estimation, he said the money. He said, talizu be'eser slaim, tachas talis shal hektish. Uparazu be'eser slaim, tachas parazu shal hektish. This $10 or 10 silver coin talis is going in exchange for the Holy One. Or this 10 silver coin cow is going in exchange for the Holy One. Then, afilu haisa hektish shava chamish v'shalai eser, even if the hektish's property, the one that was already holy, was worth only 5 silver coins, and yours was 10, you have to add a fifth on your price. You have to add 2.5 silver coins, 25% of the original 10. Because here you declared the $10, the 10 silver coin redemption. You set your price. The new one that becomes holy, if you want to redeem that one, it's second tier hektish, as we already explained. Second tier hektish doesn't require a fifth later on. Halacha Yud Beis, we're going to explore a couple of similar cases, one to each other, where again, hektish will typically have the upper hand. Hapaida miyada hektish, when somebody redeems something from hektish. So in halacha, it's important to know, just in short, there's 2 stages to acquiring something. When you give the money, and then you have to actually do meshicha, you pull it into your possession. So, forget the temple treasury for a second. Regularly speaking, if I pay you for something, even if I give you the money, it's not mine until I actually bring it into my possession. Okay? This way, it saves the buyer, because if just giving the money would effectuate the transaction, then we're worried that the seller might be negligent. He's like, listen, I already have the money. Forget it. I don't have to take care of the property to get it to the buyer. This way, we say it's not the buyer's till he actually pulls it. That's usually how it works. Takes possession of it, exactly. The question is, what happens if between giving the money and taking possession, the price changed? So now, sometimes somebody might want to retract or not. So, regularly speaking, taking possession is all that matters. If the buyer didn't yet take possession and the value goes down, he can ask for his money back. Once he took if he didn't take possession. If he did take possession, then it's too bad. But with hektish, we're going to see.
The other way, if it went up in price.
Same thing. If it goes up in price, if he didn't take possession, if he didn't take possession, the seller can say, give more money. Right. Give more money, then you can have it. Okay, right? That's with regular people. However, with hektish,
exchange must be done immediately to make it enforceable.
Yes. But with the temple treasury, we always give them the upper hand. Except for in one scenario, we'll see. So let's go through it. Hapaida miyada hektish. A guy is redeeming an animal from hektish. Mashach b'maneh. He took possession of the animal while the market price was $100. And he didn't give the money yet, and the market price jumps, now it's worth 200. So he's already taken possession, but he hasn't paid. Regularly speaking, it's his. He only has to give 100. However, because it's temple treasury, noisin masayim, he has to pay 200. Shenemar, because it says, special verse by hektish, v'nasa nasa kesef v'kam loy. He gives the money, and then it goes to him. B'nesin nasa kesef ushaloi, with the giving of the money is when it becomes his. Mashche b'masayim, watch the number switch. The person pulled the animal, took possession at the market price of 200. And he never gave the money. By the time he gave the money, it was worth 100. So here, one second, you just told me that it's only about giving the money. So maybe only 100. No. Now we jump to the other side. Nice and Masayim, you still have to pay 200 like it was when you took possession of it. Why? Even though we give the temple treasury the strength to say that it only becomes only becomes the buyer's. Wow. Even though we said that we give a temple treasury the strength, that it becomes the buyer's only when he pays the money, but that's only if it works to their advantage. We're never going to let a regular guy be more powerful than the temple treasury. In this case, he acquired the animal by taking possession of it. He already becomes liable to pay the money. So even though later it goes down in price, you got to pay 200 like a regular guy would. So again, we jump on both sides of the fence to give hekdesh the advantage. Similar case, except that instead of the first act being possession, the first act was money. So let's see over here. Pada b'masayim. A person actually redeemed it for 200 v'nasan hadamin. He gave the money. And he didn't have a chance to put it into his possession, and it goes down to $100. In a regular scenario, the guy would say, look, I never took possession of it. I want to only have to pay 100, and that's allowed. However, here, by giving the money, temple treasury already got the money, and that's it. Let him take possession of his animal. Temple treasury gets 200. Other scenario, he gave $100. First gave the money. And he didn't have a chance to take possession of it. Till now it's 200. This is the only case. What's redeemed is redeemed. He only has to pay that 100 which he gave. Why? Why don't we say a regular person shouldn't be more strict than hekdesh? In a regular scenario, if the guy wants to take possession of it, he'll have to pay 100. So he'll have to pay 200, excuse me. So why don't we say that temple treasury also should have to take 200? So the Rambam now tells us about a little caveat here. Because even a regular person, were he to retract at this point, he would get what's called a mishapara. Mishapara is like a verbal, embarrassing declaration in the court. The court would say, the same God who got retribution from the generation of the flood and the generation of the Tower of Babel and the Egyptians and Sodom and Amorah, he should take retribution from a person who goes back on his word. No financial consequence, but it was a very, very embarrassing scene to be made if you retracted from a sale. So here, a regular guy would retract, would get a mishapara. And therefore, ve'ein hekdesh roy lekabel mishapara. We don't want to give this mishapara declaration to temple treasury. And therefore, in this case, once the guy gave 100, even if the market value goes up, we're going to say, you know what, you gave 100 already? Keep it at that, take your animal, go home. Halacha yudalid hamakdish kol nechasav. A person declared all of his property hekdesh. V'hoisa alav ksubas isha ishtare ba'li chayves. And he had a field that was on lien to either his wife for her ksuba or another creditor. Right? That means you owed somebody $10,000, or your wife potentially. In the marriage document, you're right. In case of divorce, I'm going to give you X amount of money, and the field is on lien. Then you go, you say, you know what? Everything I have is holy. So the Rambam says, Ein ha'isha yechayla ligvais ksubasa min ha'hekdesh v'loi bal chayvas chayvai. It interrupts the lien. Now the woman cannot go to this field and get her money back, nor can the creditor get his debt back. Shaha'hekdesh mafkia hashibud shekadam. Making something holy revokes the lien. What are we doing? We'll see. But if the hekdesh ever sells that property and it becomes mundane, then the woman and the creditor can go after the buyer and get their money from them, because the lien is still in place. The hekdesh just lifts it for a bit while it's holy. Once it goes back to being unholy, the lien comes back. What can this be compared to? It can be compared to the case of the two buyers. I was trying to find the picture that I made when we learned this originally. But if you have two buyers, basically it's like this: a husband has a field which is on lien to his wife's ksuba. He sells the field to a guy, and the guy knows that this field is on lien to the ksuba. So he goes to the woman and he says, 1 second, I'm only going to buy this field if you promise that you're not going to bother me again. So she writes, Shekas v'lorisha, and she writes to the first one, Dinu dvarim ein li'imach. I promise you, buy the field for my husband, I'm not going to bother you. I have nothing against you. Umachar lasheni. Then this buyer goes and sells the field to a second buyer, shehi teirefes min hasheni. The woman can go after the second buyer and get her field back. Why? Just say, I only wrote the document to the first guy. I never promised you, I'm not going to go after you.
It's related to the same property.
Huh?
It's related.
Doesn't matter. She writes to each person what she owes and what she doesn't owe. Same thing over here that I'm saying. This case of the temple treasury is similar. You make your field holy So fine, holiness removes the lien. The woman and the creditor can't go after it. But once it goes out of the holy possession to the next guy, then they can go and get it. Halacha tezayin v'ketzad poidin karka zeh. How do we go about redeeming this land? Who's going to buy it? Who's going to redeem it if they know there's a woman and a creditor waiting to go and jump on them as soon as they pay it? No one's going to pay the worth of the actual worth of the field. So the Rambam says, Mashbi'in es ha'isha bal chayv tchila, kederech kol ha'bali para min nechasim mishubadim. First of all, we have the woman or the creditor take oath. Bichlal, when you come to collect from a property that's on lien, you have to swear before you collect your dues. Make them take the oath, like anybody who comes to get paid back from property on lien. Then you make an announcement for 60 days, for 2 months, about this field, that it's about to go on sale. And we evaluate, or some texts have v'oimrin, and we announce, Kama adam reitza litin besada, al menas litin lo isha ksubaso lebal chayvas chayvay. We're very transparent. We say, guys, listen, this field has 2 people waiting to collect from it. There's a woman who needs to collect her ksuba, there's a guy who needs to collect his loan. How much are you willing to pay for the small margin of profit that you might end up having? You're not going to get the whole field because it's going to be taken away by these creditors. But how much would you pay to be able to retain whatever you'll retain of the field? And beautiful. After you redeem it, the buyer can buy it for whatever, even the smallest coin. So nobody should say that, temple treasury is releasing things with no proper redemption, but even the smallest amount is okay. The redeemer goes and pays them back, creditor, the woman, and whatever he's left with, he's left with. Truth is, a person could even redeem it at a loss. The field is worth 90. What's owed is 100. That means if you're going to redeem this field from Hekdesh, you're going to be left with nothing. You're literally giving a donation. So if somebody wants to go into that and do that, that's fine. He can redeem it that way. But if the amount owed is twice the amount of property on lien, the field is worth $100, and there's a lien on it of $200. When Temple Treasury redeems it, they actually will ignore the liens. They will not even talk about it. And they won't even redeem it on the condition of paying back the liens. You redeem it regularly. Because if they're going to make a condition, nobody in their right mind will pay at a double loss. You may give a donation for a little loss, but not for a double loss. Halacha Yudzayin, Hamakdish Kol Nechasav, Ta'achar Kach Geiresh Es Ishtoi. If somebody makes his entire property holy, and then divorces his wife, V'gavsa Ksubasa Min HaPoida Min HaHekdesh, and she collects her ksuba from the person who redeems it. In other words, the scenario we just spoke about plays out. So I'm going to put it over here on the screen. Yeah, this is the field, right? Guy says, all my property is holy. That's step 1. He makes all his property holy. Boom, comes the second guy, and he redeemed the field, knowing that there's a lien on this field. Indeed, the guy divorces his wife, and now the woman comes back to the guy to get the field, which is all allowed. However, the Rambam says at this point, when she comes to get back her field, Eina goiva ad sheyadirano hana. She cannot get the field back unless the husband makes a vow that he's never going to have benefit from this woman. Why? Because maybe they're in collusion. Maybe they're in cahoots. Shema knunya asu ala hekdesh. Maybe they're making a collusion against hekdesh. Watch what happens. If the guy made his field holy, guy buys it back, he divorces, she gets the field back, boom, they get remarried. Now he has the field because his wife took it. And he's paid money for it. The ein imrin. Now, we don't say ilu ratza haya omer betos tikdashti v'yishoyel al hekdeshe lechacham b'yachzalei. This is another way the guy can make a collusion. He can just say later on, you know what, I made a hekdesh by mistake. It was all a mistake. And then the whole field will go back to him anyways because it was, the whole hekdesh will be undone. That we don't say. People won't do that. We don't have to be worried about that. But this kind of collusion, we sure have to be worried about. And therefore, before the woman gets the money back, the husband must promise never to have benefit from her again. Also, after you made something holy, you can't say, oh, you know what, actually there's a guy that I owe money to. Like he was saying before, no disclosure. You'll only disclose about it afterwards. like kli zeh shel pleinihu, or the object that I just sanctified actually belongs to somebody else. Maybe they're going to make a collusion on hektish. Even if the creditor is holding a document that attests to his loan, we don't give him extra precedence. He has to collect like anybody else collects. In other words, you wait, as we explained, for the hektish to sell it, and then if there's any money left, you get to collect over there. When do we say that a person is not believed afterwards, to disclose afterwards new information, is only if he's healthy. But if you have a sick person, he's in bed, and he declares all his property holy. And when he makes his property holy, he says, by the way, you should know, I owe somebody a money, $100. Neman, he's believed. Nobody makes jokes. Nobody makes tricks on temple treasury when he's about to die. Thereby sinning only for other people's gain. He's going to die. So there's no reason not to believe him. Therefore, if he says, not only he discloses the loan, but he actually says, give that person the field that I just made holy, the creditor can take it without even making an oath. If he didn't expressly say to give it, we don't give it to him unless he has an actual certified document. Then he can take the property from hektish because of the last will and testament of this guy who was sick. But that's only if he said it directly after he made it holy, within the very short time frame. If only it was a while after he made it holy, that's when he said give it to the guy. We don't listen to him. He's like any other creditor. If he has a certification on his document, he can swear and get it from the guy who ultimately redeems it, but not straight from the temple treasury. As the commentator has explained, there's basically three levels. You have a healthy guy. You have before the consecration. If you disclose before making the consecration, everybody's believed. Healthy guy, sick guy. If you disclose right after you make the consecration, healthy guy is not believed, sick guy is believed. If you disclose way after, nobody's believed. Halacha chaf, the final halacha, misha yatsa alav koil, shehifkeres nechasa v'higdishon eyachriman. If there's just a rumor about a guy that he declared all his property ownerless, or made them hektish, or made them cherem, some kind of consecration, ein cheshesh we don't have to worry about that. We don't listen to the rumor. Ad shetiyah sham raya brura, till there's actual clear proof of consecration.